Ladies and gentlemen, thanks very much for attending this press conference. Unfortunately, we don't receive a subsidy from Pretoria like other self-proclaimed leaders, so we're not in a position to offer you something more comfortable. Sisters and brothers, before we actually start with the press conference in detailing what we have to say, we just wanted to express a few words to the press in general, and that being one that as journalists we are living in an apartheid society, and as journalists that brings very heavy social responsibilities. As COSATU, we have been seen in the recent press coverage from particular newspapers quite biased press coverage, or in some cases no press coverage at all. Whether that arises from a basic disagreement with what COSATU has to say or not, we are not very clear about at this stage. But we believe that even in terms of conservative journalism, that the basic tenet of that would be to report both sides of the story. So we also want to, in some way, say to the press that as an organization, a workers' organization, we do not run a very slick operation in terms of press coverage. I think that's an inadequacy we admit very clearly from our side. But I think from our side, we would request that the press itself begins to adjust in some way to the type of democratic structures that unions have. They do take time to respond to issues. We're not available at a minute's notice. We don't have any professional journalists handling very diplomatically the media. But I think it's a type of democracy that is important. It's also a democracy of the future. So from the point of view of COSATU, we would just like to say those few words to you as the press. We trust that in some way that this would be taken note of. And we're not asking. Sisters and brothers, we have held our first Central Executive Committee on the 7th, 8th, and 9th of wide-ranging national and international issues, and certain policy decisions which were outstanding from our first inaugural Congress were also finalized at this meeting. We have in the notes that we have supplied to you detailed the main contents of those decisions, and I would attempt now to summarize the main issues in each of those points that we have raised in the press statement we are releasing today. We have finalized the following policy resolutions: the political policy, the policy on multinationals, the policy on financial assistance, our policy on May 1st and June 16th, policy on deregulation, our policy on united action against repression of unionists and unions, and our international policy. These policy resolutions are attached to what we called. Second issue that we felt was important to highlight to the press was the present attacks on COSATU by Inkatha, and the move by elements linked to Inkatha to set up so-called alternative unions. This clearly is a move designed to undermine the unity of the working class in the face of massive attacks by the apartheid government, big business, and other enemies of working class unity who would use tribalism or racism to divide workers. The CEC endorsed a statement prepared by the Natal Regional Congress and the Regional Executive Committee, which is attached to the back of your press statement, particularly disturbed at the level of violence that has been perpetrated against our leadership, and has resolved to begin a national and international campaign to counter the violence against COSATU. We would urge, therefore, those elements who use violence against COSATU to take note that COSATU will and can defend itself, and that the use of violence will eventually prove to be counterproductive to the interests of those who are using it against COSATU. Statement of its position, we have dealt in the statement of our position in Natal as an extension of the apartheid system. We have made demands that apartheid be dismantled, that political be created. We have also responded to statements being made against ourselves by Inkatha in terms of declaring itself in a state of war against COSATU. We have in the statement answered that point. We have also in the statement noted that since the attacks on COSATU by Inkatha, certain violent incidents of violence have been perpetrated against our membership and our leadership. The houses of 2 of our officials in the Newcastle and Fried area have been burnt down, and our offices in Newcastle have been invaded, and there are senior leadership people in the Impangeni area that have been threatened with death. Again, in terms of what I've said earlier, that we will and can defend ourselves, and we have started within South Africa a campaign, both nationally and a campaign internationally, to counter the violence against ourselves. We have responded in that statement to that allegation. We have said very clearly that it's taken 4 years of democratic discussions to reach the point of forming COSATU. We have said that we have a strong commitment to democracy, and that our greatest achievement has been to build structures through which our membership and leadership can express their views. And all decisions in COSATU are based on mandates. We have said that while we are a trade union organization, we will not and cannot, in the South African situation, separate our struggle for rights on the factory floor from our rights, or broader rights, for freedom in our country. In relation to that, as indicated by the resolutions taken at our inaugural Congress, and subsequently by statements made by the leadership, which have been fully endorsed by our Central Executive Committee, that we will demand the right to the release of elected and popular leaders, including Nelson Mandela. We will demand the unbanning of organizations banned by the minority apartheid government, and that we see this not only as our right, but our duty and responsibility. We have responded in the third part of our statement to the allegations that we are against free enterprise. We have stated very clearly that we are against free enterprise. We, as COSATU, we will reflect the interests of the working class, and that we believe quite clearly that workers have built the wealth of South Africa, and that the only returns we have received for our labor is the starvation wages we earn. Wages of 20 Rand a week that have been paid in homeland areas like KwaZulu in Isitheba. We believe, secondly, that black people in South Africa, the majority of people have been dispossessed of their land by a minority, that free enterprise is built on this dispossession of the land of the majority. We see that free enterprise is also based on the denial of political rights to the majority of black people in this country. And we would subsequently pose the question to Inkatha whether they want us to support a system that has resulted in the enslavement and poverty of our people. We have been accused at one level in the Natal area of wanting to close down all the factories and wanting the factories to move out of South Africa and workers to lose their jobs. We see this as a form of very cheap propaganda, and that shows very little understanding of our resolution on disinvestment or the economy in South Africa. We believe that the minority regime in all its forms will not and cannot serve the interests of the majority of South African people. In the present political and economic crisis, with the clampdown by the Botha regime through the state of emergency, with hundreds of our people killed or jailed, and the democratic forces in the whole world are campaigning for the isolation of the apartheid government. What worldwide would large-scale support internally Why have they come out so directly against the disinvestment campaign? As the largest trade union center in South Africa, we have seen no substantial evidence for change. At the very least, what we have seen is that certain workers, unions. What we can see is that the disinvestment campaign is definitely having an effect on the Botha regime. And what we believe very clearly, that it is of the Botha regime. And therefore, to accuse us of causing the loss of jobs is not only to deliberately distort our resolution, but be blind to the political and economic realities. We have attacks on us by Inkatha in Natal. We then would like to deal the affiliates involved in industries linked to large agricultural plantations will take responsibility for implementing this resolution. All workers are entitled to rights to trade unions, and COSATU will seek national and international support in its campaign to organize farm workers. The fifth issue of importance was the Unemployed Workers Union. Again, in terms of a Congress resolution, COSATU will work towards forming a union for unemployed workers. And we believe that for too long now, the unemployed have been used by employers and the government as a bulwark against the struggles of organized labor, and the setting up of an unemployed workers' union will strengthen the unity of the organized workers. The sixth issue of importance would be located in Johannesburg. Employers giving evidence against unionists charged for their union activities. The ninth issue was the centenary celebrations. COSATU is going ahead with its campaign to organize a boycott of the Johannesburg centenary celebrations. Regions are going to work out programs of action. Whilst the bosses, the state, and their surrogates will be celebrating the fact that they have been exploiting workers for 100 years, the workers will be thinking of the 1946 mine workers' strike, about the 1980 Johannesburg municipal workers' strike, and therefore COSATU calls on all Democrats committed to our struggle for freedom to observe the campaign and participate in alternative programs arranged by COSATU and other progressive organizations. Leave the food and canning workers in the Western Province. These would constitute the executive of COSATU, together with the national talks in each sector. Each sector shall have a feasibility committee which will collate information and make it available to affiliates. The General Secretary and the Assistant General of dismantling a system of national oppression and economic exploitation. The meeting felt his speech indicated that position. COSATU has clearly stated that only a complete and immediate dismantlement of apartheid, the release of our authentic leaders, and the unbanning of the authentic organizations of the oppressed majority will create the climate where a democratic South Africa can emerge. COSATU reaffirms its commitment to a democratic South Africa based on one person, one vote. COSATU therefore views the move to set up a national statutory council as another fraudulent attempt to perpetuate white minority rule. It is clear that those who agree to serve in the council are party to the continued political and economic domination of the majority of people in South Africa. The CEC has instructed the Executive Committee to present a more detailed response to the specific implications of the Rubicon 2 speech. And finally, the GENCO issue. The CEC received a full report of the mass dismissal of 23,000 workers by GENCO management in Bophuthatswana. The actions of one of South Africa's major monopolies clearly demonstrates the involvement of so-called free enterprise in the machinery of the apartheid state. The mass dismissals also clearly demonstrate how the Bantustan system has become an agent of the employers and the Botha government. The CEC has asked all affiliates to take steps to ensure that workers are reinstated and that NUM is recognized and allowed to organize by the Bantustan government and GENCO. Sisters and brothers, that is the main content of the discussions of our CEC meeting held It is an attempt to illegitimize political protests from the democratic majority, and we will resist that with all the resources we have. In more specific terms, the type of campaigns we will launch internationally will depend. We have, as the largest trade union coordinating center in South Africa, extensive international backing and contacts, and we have had numerous requests from international trade unions for specific information on this respect. We see also that the West has been responsible for boosting certain self-proclaimed leaders. We find that the actions of whose organizations are not in keeping with the principles that they state. And what we have said is what my brother Chris here has said is that we will inform the world of the actions. And we are confident that we will receive full backing of the international community in this respect. Because nowhere in the world will workers, when they come under attack as such as here, will those workers not receive international solidarity. GENCO, the miners' dismissal in Botswana has been referred to our regions. There are obviously a number of points that have been raised as to a program of action that has been referred to the regions and the affiliates, and obviously they will be pursuing that program. As of yet, we would not be prepared to disclose the actual content of that program, but obviously it will include bringing intense pressure on GENCO and more broadly on the mine bosses for the reinstatement of those mine workers and the recognition of the NUM.
Like in transporting food and metal, what about the general unions? What role are they playing in?
Yes. General unions should be disregarded, or to a very large extent, should not be looked into very seriously. What we as COSATU have decided on is that general unions should be seen from the very beginning as part of a measure. They must not just be called in when two industrial unions have merged. They also have to be considered, as being part of the measure, and therefore they must directly participate, one, in the drafting perhaps of a new constitution. They must not just be left out and always thrown in at a later stage.
Well, so originally two unions, the Sweet Food and Allied Workers Union and the Food and Canning Workers Union. Since the unity talks, the Credentials Committee, a third union has been involved, which is the Retail and Allied Workers Union, and they have been fully involved in planning the launching of a new food union. There's also been meetings held with representatives from general unions, and what has been done specifically by the Central Executive Committee is that a feasibility committee has been appointed in each industrial sector